Both China and the U.S. have shaped the world and its trends in many ways. Currently, only the United States fulfills the criteria to be considered a superpower. However, the People's Republic of China receives continual coverage in the popular press of its emerging superpower status and has been identified as a rising or emerging economic growth and military superpower by academics and other experts. Today, we will be analyzing a world scenario in which China becomes more powerful than the U.S. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for more amazing content like today's video. First, let's analyze some of the historic effects of a world power achieving victory in some way, and how its culture will shape the remaining countries of the world. British and then American global preeminence across the globe accounts for the fact that it is the English language that ended up the planet's dominant language, not French or Arabian. Slave trade worldwide received an untimely mortal blow in 1807, when philosophical and political developments within Britain resulted in its prohibition, and because it was Britain that had the naval strength to enforce the ban. This means that the philosophical advances in Britain were such that the implemented changes were also enforced in other countries across the globe, despite only occurring in Britain. Fast forward a century, and the Western victory in World War I placed the democratic form of government at the forefront of the world's political fashion, where it remains to this day. Since the first half of the 20th century, the U.S. has left an enormous mark on the globalized world, which goes far beyond the obvious geopolitics. An incessant stream of political values, financial activities, and sheer culture flowing from America has incalculable effects. The total sum of various manifestations of American culture and influence has played an important role in shaping the modern world and has remained like so for almost a whole century. Today, America's preeminence is challenged mostly by China. To be sure, the two nations go to some lengths not to let their competition go quite out of hand and are economically interdependent. The essence of what is happening, however, is that China has become the second power in the world, and it wants to become the first. The United States, meanwhile, is not disposed to see itself replaced in its position of leadership. Of course, competition is not exactly a bad thing when we analyze the fact that there cannot be many world superpowers. There is nothing unusual about the current superpower and the second power competing against each other. Struggle for preeminence has been going on with only brief pauses since the early modern age. During the later Renaissance and religious wars periods, it was Spain versus France. From the late 17th century to the end of the Napoleonic Wars, it was France against England and then Britain. For much of the 19th century, it was Britain against Russia. In the early 20th century, Britain against Germany. In World War II, the United States against Germany and Japan. During the Cold War, it was the United States against the Soviet Union. Today, it is the United States versus China. As we have seen from these examples, when a country becomes the global leader, its internal reality shapes the outside world, and so would be the case with China if they were to replace the U.S. Considering China's internal reality, we can assume some general things that might happen in the world, which are the following. First, China's rise won't just be good for China. The whole balance of power is going to change, and one of the biggest differences is going to be a whole lot more power in Africa. Not many people realize just how big of a role China is already playing in Africa. China is currently the biggest source of African aid in the world. They've invested billions of dollars into the continent, and they're only planning on spending more. By 2025, they're projected to have sent Africa $1 trillion. Western countries have too many moral qualms to invest that much money in a land where so many countries are led by dictators. American money tends to come with demands for political reform or the ends of anthracites, or, depending on who the president is, just gets cut altogether. But China doesn't care what Africa does. They've happily given money to the worst African tyrants, so long as it's profitable for them, which it usually is. China says they get a six-fold return on every dollar they invest in Africa. And since they'll be allowed to do things their own way, we won't just see a world under Chinese influence. We'll start to see a world under African influence as well. Africa will be the country most benefited from China's rise. And of course, other countries will be hit very hard in return. Not everybody can be the winner of this fight. Let's begin with America. The global power exchange will also hit the U.S. hard, probably causing them to plummet down into an economic depression. While right now the U.S. dollar is treated as the new gold standard for international trade, the U.S. will lose almost 2% of its economic output overnight. Europe will also be gravely affected, with their power plummeting against Asia's rising power. A lot of European countries have responded to their declining influence by trying to reimagine the continent as a united power in an effort to get their strengths up. However, should China take over as the world's superpower, then North America and Europe will become less important than Eastern countries. Also, Japan will be one of the most deeply affected by China's rise. China still hasn't forgiven Japan for the atrocities they committed during World War II, partly because Japan has never fully apologized to them. Japanese atrocities still play a major role in Chinese propaganda, with the state making sure that their citizens never forget that the Japanese are their enemies. They will also very probably invade Taiwan. World policing will also be greatly reduced, as most world countries will not be affected by the Chinese interference. The Chinese don't really care that much for democracy, unlike the U.S., which tends to invade other countries in order to defend them. The Communist Party of China has very publicly declared its intention to rewrite history. In a speech, President Xi Jinping told his country that he was working to improve internal communication so that they could present a true, multi-dimensional and panoramic view of China. China is determined to rewrite what they consider Western misconceptions of history, or in other words, to replace the world's perception of history with theirs. One of the bullet points on their agenda is to change our concept of Chairman Mao, and to get the world to accept him as a wise, influential leader. They want to break down the perception that the rise of communism in China brought problems and make it seem gentler. Movies, art, and most media will also be deeply changed. The Chinese state has started their own film production company to try to get those movies out there. They're already working on making their own movies. They recently got Matt Damon, for example, to star in their film The Great Wall. And they've already managed to get other countries to rewrite their movies to appease them. The villain in Red Dawn, the 2012 version, was changed from China to North Korea, while Looper was set in a futuristic China. Finally, and probably more scarily, China and the United States of America will probably go to war for the title of superpower. As we've seen from previous examples, the power shift is only fully consummated after a conflict is solved. It has been since the medieval ages. It happened during the World Wars and other major world conflicts. Turns out that the winners get the spoils of war, and so will happen if China becomes the winner against the U.S. And of course, the U.S. won't go down lightly. Those are definitely many things that will happen to the world if China were to become more powerful than the U.S. Good, scary, or quite a mixture of both things. What did you think of these things? Please let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to give us a like, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content like today's video. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Listen!